Hello everybody, this is Michael Saltzman from Blue Sky Bio. In this tutorial video, I will demonstrate how to prepare a surgical guide for 1 or 2 implant planning using the surgical guide wizard in the Blue Sky Plan software. This is using version 4.9.4 of the software. This is currently our latest update. It includes some improvements, including automatic AI-driven nerve detection. You don't have to click anywhere. You don't have to do anything. It automatically detects the nerves for you. It includes other improvements to automation that we have. For example, the STL to CT scan alignment of the model. It includes some improvements to the process flow. So I'm going to run you through it, again, using Blue Sky Plan version 4.9.4 of the software. So I'm going to start the process flow by clicking on Implant Planning and Surgical Guides. And I'm going to click on the 1 or 2 implant case option. This will launch the step-by-step wizard to take us really literally step-by-step through the process, dictating what should be done at each step. If you're doing a case of more than 2 implants, then you could use other options of using the normal advanced mode to treatment plan your case. So I'm going to continue by clicking 1 or 2 implant case. The first screen that comes up is asking us what are our import types. So we have different options here. If you're going to be importing a model STL model of a CT impression CT or impression CT with markers. Most cases are probably done with model STLs. Their process flow does vary slightly if you're importing an impression or a model CT to get you the right models imported and on screen. But we're going to select model STL, which is the STL of the model or the STL of an intraoral scan, and we're going to select the kit type. Okay, we're going to demonstrate this process flow with the Blue Sky Bio fully guided surgical kit, which is what we recommend. It is important to select the correct kit here because it affects the settings and the implant selection that you'll have later on in the wizard process. Once you have the proper import type and kit type selected, go ahead and click on OK. So we have our shortcut buttons that could take us quickly to our desktop, documents, downloads, or if you have a network set up, that's going across the top. The software could load uncompressed DICOMs, compressed DICOMs, DICOMs in a zip file. We made the system as robust as possible to try to get everything as quickly and easily into the software. So I'm going to select the folder containing the DICOMs. I can also select a particular DICOM and it will load the whole set. Either way, and I'm going to click on OK. I'll put a link to the data set in the description of this video, so if you want to follow along and use it as training step by step with the exact same data set, you could go ahead and download that and do that. Before we continue, I'm going to give a shout out to our complete aligner package available on Lab Pronto. So if you're doing aligners or if somebody in your practice is doing aligners, they're great quality aligners, super fast turnaround, and as you could see at really value prices. So you could click on the ad to learn more, or you could go to prontoaligners.com. We'll give you all the information, how to place the order. Super easy and straightforward to do so. So that's prontoaligners.com. At this point, we're going to use our left mouse button to grab and drag any of the yellow outlines to reduce the field of view to the relevant field of view. That will reduce the processing power necessary for the computer. It will also magnify the area that's relevant to fill up the relevant areas on your screen. If for whatever reason the patient is scanned at the improper angle, you could go ahead and use the blue circles to align the scan. In most situations that's not necessary. So just grab and drag the yellow lines to limit the field of view to the relevant field of view. Once you have that done, go ahead and click on OK. So what we see happening now, just now, was an automatic, completely automatic. I didn't click on anything. As soon as I limited my field of view and clicked on OK, it brought the DICOMs onto the screen, loaded the DICOMs into the case, and automatically, 100% automatically detected the nerves for me in the particular case. So we had a button up saying, skip, this is a maxilla. So if it is a maxilla case and you're not detecting the nerves, you could just go ahead and click and cancel that button. But what we do see now is that both nerves are drawn 100% automatically. We could see the nerves in our different views as well. If there is a reason to go ahead and modify them, we could just grab and drag any of the nodes either in the panoramic in the bottom left or in the axial slices in the top left. We could grab and drag any of these nodes and modify the location. So you could go ahead and review the slices and make any modifications if they are necessary. Generally on the top, we have buttons that might be relevant. So if you need to redo the auto detection, you could go ahead and redo that. If you want to set to the right nerve or the left nerve manually, then you could go ahead and do that. And if it's maxilla, then you could just click maxilla and it will obviously skip the nerve detection. So those options exist as well simply by clicking any of the buttons that we have on the top of the screen. Once we've confirmed the nerve location, we're going to go ahead and click on next. The next screen that comes up is asking us to select the STL file of the relevant model for the relevant jaw. So again, you can use the shortcut buttons or go ahead and navigate to the relevant location. Click on the file. We could see the file appear on the screen. We could use our mouse buttons, and again, it's mouse buttons throughout the software if you're not familiar with them. Left mouse button allows you to grab and drag and rotate. Right mouse button, moving the mouse backwards or forward, allows you to zoom in and out. And holding down the wheel of the mouse allows you to grab and drag and move the model around on the screen. So select the correct relevant model and go ahead and click on OK. The software asks for confirmation regarding which jaw the model is for. Select the relevant jaw, click OK. And again, we have another completely automatic process where the model is aligned to the CT scan. So there's nothing that has to be done here. Just give the software a second, and we'll see that the software aligns the model to the CT scan, and we're able to proceed. Okay, so now we have the alignment done completely automatically for us. We could go ahead and confirm that alignment. One of the ways to go ahead and confirm is by looking at our axial slices, and as we move closer and closer to the occlusal surface, what we want to see is the outline of the model is hugging tightly around the teeth in our axial view, and we see that is indeed the case here. As we continue to rise up, we continue to see that outline follows it very carefully. We can also confirm in the axial view that as we go around the arch, once again in the areas where there are teeth, then the outline should be totally hugging the outline of the tooth in the CT scan, showing us that the alignment is tight and accurate and placed properly. Again, we have our buttons on the top. If we want to rerun the alignment or if we want to do it manually by marking the teeth and other techniques, you could go ahead and click on that option. We're not going to get into that right now, but you should know that the options exist. We're going to go ahead and click on next and move on to the next step, which is positioning our crowns. Of course, the whole point of placing the implant is to give the patient a tooth. So we're going to select the relevant tooth and we're going to place the crown together with the implant with proper alignment. We can make modifications to the crown placement or the implant placement later. What we're doing right now is we're selecting the location of the missing tooth, the relevant crown. We do have different sets of teeth here in the software, so you could browse through them, see the one that you like, see the one that's most relevant for the patient, and select that accordingly. You can also select the general relevant size, small, medium, or large. Again, you'll be able to update the size after we place it, but go ahead and select the relevant option there. And what you want to do is select the relevant implant that you're going to be placing. So we have an extensive list of different implant systems. We recommend the use of Blue Sky Bio implants. For this demonstration, let's go ahead and select the BioMax implant. And you'll be able to adjust or modify the width and the length later if need be, but you're selecting an initial placement. And you could go ahead and select an abutment as well. We'll be able to design the crown for the digital abutment. And this as well, if we want to switch the abutment later or change it, we'll be able to do so, but this is our initial selection. So let's go ahead and select that abutment and click OK. Now, when we go ahead and click on OK, we'll be placing the crown together with the implant, together with the abutment, into the treatment plan. We're now going to put our cursor on the location where we want to place the crown. We're going to left click once in that location, and we see now that the crown, the implant, and the abutment have been placed. Again, I'm using the mouse controls. Left mouse button allows you to grab and drag. The wheel of the mouse, if you scroll it, lets you zoom in and out, as does holding down the right mouse button and moving in and out. And if we press the wheel of the mouse as if it's a button, then we could grab and drag the whole scene. So right now we have our crown, our abutment, and our implant that are going to move together and be positioned together. We could simply grab and drag everything together and position it correctly in the right spot. We could use the arrows as well to move everything together in any direction. And our primary concern at this step of the process is to get that crown in the ideal prosthetic location. So here I could see that maybe I should have chosen a larger crown in the option when we had the small, medium, or large. Here I'm going to rotate using my left mouse button and grabbing the widget. But what I could do here as well is I could use the nodes to just expand that crown. I could just grab the nodes in any direction and use that to resize the crown. And to get that in our general positioning with the general size. Now, before we go ahead and design the crown, which I'll show that in a separate video, in a follow-up video, how to design an immediate load crown, we'll be able to fine-tune the exact dimensions and the exact design and all the specifications and parameters of the crown to give us the perfectly desired and designed crown. One thing to notice and to point out here is when you kind of click on the implant and activate the implant, then you have the widget to move everything together. If you go ahead and click and activate the crown, then you'll still have that widget to move everything together. In addition, you'll have the nodes if you like to resize the crown. Okay, so go ahead and position everything in the ideal positioning. Okay, and then go ahead and click on Next. At this stage of the process, what we do is we see the 3D view on one side of the screen, and the other side of the screen is our tangential view showing us 360 degrees around the location of the implant. So I'm able to use the wheel of my mouse or grab the slider up and down. We also have an option here if you want to keep the implant completely vertical and have the rotation rotate around the vertical implant, then we have this button right up here where you could change the setting of that, and here we see the implant is now vertical, and when we rotate everything, we'll rotate with the implant staying vertical. So that's an option you should be aware of as well. In this step, it's adjust implant position. So what we're able to do is we're able to move the implant without affecting the positioning of our tooth. So we could go ahead and make any modifications that we want to the implant and the abutment together. If at this point we realize, okay, we need a different size implant or abutment, we could just go ahead and click on the right click on the implant or on the abutment and choose replace. It will take us back to the screen that we have before where we could select and resize the implant and or the abutment and make it the modifications that we want that way. In addition, if we do want to make any adjustments to the crown size or positioning, we could still do so in the 3D view. But essentially what we're doing is there's now a disconnect between the implant and abutment on one hand and the crown on the other hand. So any change that we make to the crown will affect only the crown, and any change that we make to the implant and abutment in terms of the positioning or whatever will affect only the implant and abutment. So what we saw in the previous step is that everything moved together and we could position everything together based on the prosthetic location of the crown. And in this step, what we're able to do is to adjust the positioning of each one separately. Once we're happy with the positioning of the implant and abutment, we're going to go ahead and click on Next. Okay, we're up to the step of drawing the guide curve. Before we do that, let me just point out this red exclamation mark. If we go ahead and click on it, it will show us any notifications or warning or information that we should look out for. This is our validation panel, by the way, our validation settings, which will give us this red exclamation mark if we're violating anything. In our situation, it's just giving us a drill kit warning that if we go ahead and change the offset value, if we go ahead and change things manually, then the variable height driver should be used. Okay, in our situation, it's not relevant. I'm just going to switch back to our wizard panel. Here's a validation panel, and here's switching back to the wizard panel. I'll also point out that if there is some sort of need to work outside the wizard, at this point, you could just click on the red X and you'll get to normal or advanced mode. If you're doing a straightforward case, then just stay in the wizard because really it leads you step by step through the process. At this point, we're ready to draw our guide curve. This brown software guide tube, if you're not familiar with it, what it is, it represents the hole in the surgical guide, and the metal cylinder is going to be inserted into the hole in the surgical guide, and that will be your surgical guide. So that's what this brown software guide tube is. It's representing the location of the hole of the surgical guide. What is important to note, and the software will warn you if there's a violation, is that the internal diameter, the inside circle of the software guide tube, should not be interfering with anything, because if it's interfering, if it's being, let's say, violated by the adjacent tooth or by the model or whatever, you're going to have a problem seating the metal cylinder. So in this situation, we're okay. And even though we have this interference between the software guide tube and our model that we can see here, the software is going to cut this out automatically. And since it's not interfering or violating the inner diameter of the software guide tube of the brown inner circle that we have here, everything is fine. Okay, so that's just a side point. What we're moving forward now is drawing the guide curve. The guide curve is going to outline the size and location of the surgical guide being created. In order to do so, I'm going to hold down the shift key. In general, to mark things in the software, you hold down the shift key. And then with my left mouse button, I'm just going to go ahead and define the area on which I would like the surgical guide to sit. When I want to rotate, I just let go of the shift key and I use my left mouse button to grab and to drag. And then when I want to continue marking, hold down the shift key again and left click with your left mouse button and go ahead and continue marking the curve where the surgical guide should be. What we do want to do is at the end, we want to go back to our start point and we just want to take that last dot and drag it into the first dot to close the curve. And what you should have noticed when I did that is that the green and the red dots, which signified the start of the curve and the end of the curve, disappeared and became one continuous curve. So make sure to close that curve, otherwise you'll have the red and the green dots showing you that the curve is still open and you won't be able to create that surgical guide. What I'm doing now is you can just grab and drag any of the nodes along the curve by clicking with your left mouse button to just fine tune the location of that surgical guide curve that you want to place. Okay, once we're happy with the curve and where that surgical guide is going to be, we go ahead and click on next. So now that we see the surgical guide has been created, we're still seeing our software guide tube, but what this shows you is that the internal hole, which is really our most crucial part of the surgical guide, aligns perfectly with the internal hole of the software guide tube, which we discussed earlier. So the surgical guide has been created perfectly on the proper location and with the proper hole. The software automatically cuts away the area around the osteotomy to show us, enable us to have windows and to make sure it's seated properly. At this point, it is good to know or important to point out that you can right-click. Well, first let's show the visibility. You can right-click on the software guide tube or on the implant and check visibility. Here we could turn off or hide. It's really toggle on and off or hiding and showing the visibility. Obviously, we're not deleting it at this point. The implant, abutment, or software guide tube. So here I've turned off the software guide tube. We could see how the location of the hole is in the correct location. Let me turn that. You know what? We could keep it off for now. Another capability that we just had on the screen is the ability to add a window. So even though the software is kind of creating these windows automatically around the osteotomy, you could create additional windows. Just click Add Window. The software puts this box on the screen. The box will represent the area that's going to be cut away to create the window. So we could use the normal controls of our widget to position, to resize this window. And the window is, of course, important in order to create visibility, make sure the guide is seated properly. So this looks like we're okay for now. You don't want to create any parts of the guides that are super thin, anything that's going to have an issue with the printing or stability. But go ahead and create that window. And once you're happy with that positioning, you click the button Recreate Guide with Windows. Okay, the notification came up on the screen that we should show the software guide tubes, because if we're not showing the software guide tubes, then the surgical guide will be created without the osteotomy hole. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Yes. So now we have the software guide tube back on the screen, and it's creating a new surgical guide for us with the added window. So here is our new and updated surgical guide with the window created. And I'm just going to comment that although this video is probably, I don't know, 20 minutes long or so, the process, if we review it, is very simple and straightforward. It's 20 minutes long because I've been explaining as we go along. But essentially, you're loading your DICOMs. I'm just going through the list on the right to remind you the process that we went through. You're loading your DICOMs. When the DICOMs, when your CT scan is loaded, the nerves are automatically detected for you. You're then selecting your STL model, which is automatically aligned for you. At each step, of course, you have the option to review and confirm or make any slight modifications, but we have the automatic nerves, we have the automatic model alignment, we positioned the crown together with the implant and abutment. We had the ability to fine tune the positioning of the crown and or the implant and abutment. And then we drew our surgical guide curve. So the process is very quick process. And after you go through the wizard, and if you're doing it for the first time or first or second time, it might take you, a couple of extra minutes. But after you do it, planning a 1 or 2 implant case is just a matter of a couple of minutes. So it's a quick and streamlined process. So now we have a surgical guide with our windows on the screen. Going to go ahead and click next. And now the software is asking us where we want to save the relevant files. So I'm going to save it on the desktop. I recommend saving it in a meaningful location with a meaningful name. You can use the patient's name or a unique patient identifier. So I have desktop selected. I'm going to click new folder. Let's call this patient sky blue surgical guide. And what we're going to see being exported is not just the surgical guide. It's actually going to be the surgical guide together with the drilling report. So we have our folder now. I have the folder selected. And then I go ahead and click on OK. So we're saving the project. So we're saving the case file, which is the project data. We're also saving the surgical guide, and we're also saving the drilling report. It's asking, would you like to complete the case approval form before sending? Some labs, if you're going to be sending it to a lab or printing centers or whatever, they will like to know that you've confirmed the planning and that it could be used for a surgical guide. So we have the option here. You could just save it or you could print it separately. If you don't want it coming up, if you don't want this question coming up anymore, we had that checkbox in the previous screen that says don't ask me again. So you could just click that and move forward. We now have an option that comes up. So now what comes up on the screen is the order form to have your surgical guide actually fabricated and manufactured. So if you're going to be printing and creating the surgical guide in-house, just go ahead and X this out. If you want to outsource the manufacturing of the surgical guide that you just, using the design that you just planned, you could fill in the order form. It will automatically attach the case that you just did, and you can have the surgical guide created at a very reasonable price with a quick turnaround and sent to you. So you could, again, you could outsource the manufacturing of the surgical guide to Lab Pronto. So you could go ahead and complete the order form and send out send the treatment plan to have the surgical guide fabricated. And then when you're done, just go ahead and click on close. Okay, notification comes up on the screen that let's just go back to that notification a second, that the treatment plan, surgical guide, and drilling report has been saved to the folder that we specified earlier. We could go ahead and click on OK. We also saw that the drilling report automatically is created and comes up on the screen, but we also have it saved to that folder. And if we want, we can just open the folder from here and it will automatically navigate and open the folder for us. And that's it. So we now have our treatment plan completed. We had the option of outsourcing manufacturing if we want to use Lab Pronto to make the surgical guide. Otherwise, in the location that we specified earlier, we now have the surgical guide, we now have the Blue Sky plan case, and we now have the drilling report. So now we click on next. And what we see happens is a few different things. We have options on the screen to start a new case or to close the wizard. What we also have is that the Blue Sky Bio website opens automatically and it puts the relevant parts into the shopping cart. So if we already have our fully guided keyless kit, for example, obviously we don't need to buy that again. But here, if we want to buy the implant or the abutments that were used in this plan, then it's here in the shopping cart. And probably most importantly is that it tells you exactly which metal cylinder was used for your case. Based on the drill kit that was selected, based on the implant that was placed, everything together, it tells you which metal cylinder was used for the case, and here it is in the shopping cart. So if you want to order the implant and abutment together with the case, great, and the metal cylinder option is here as well. You could just check out and get exactly what you need. The software gives us the option of close the wizard or to start the new case. So we could start the new case, or we could go ahead and click close the wizard. And that's it. So now we're in the software in normal mode for surgical guide planning. If we want to do another case from the initial start screen, we could just go ahead and close out this project. And then we're back to the initial start screen of the software. You could find a lot of free educational information on blueskyplan.com. You could get help with planning or fabrication or for any of your dental products on labpronto.com. Let us know if you have any questions. We're available via email, plan@blueskybio.com, and you can post any comments below.